It's been too long. It's been too long since a firearms company has came out with anything innovative, cool, that actually changes the game. Oh, we changed the gas system here. Oh, we changed the barrel length here. Oh, we made blah, 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 blah. It's all a variant. Until today, a company has stood up, found a niche in the market, and made a product that is not only usable, but is practical. It's not any of this. Ugh. What the? No, it's not an AR variant. Ugh. Ugh. Where's the weapon, ammo tax? Oh, the weapon is right here, and it is called the P365 Raider, or affectionately known as the Panty Raider.
I guess you're gonna miss the panty raid.
The what?
But I have to ask you, have you liked, commented, and subscribed yet? Because if not, you're a bad person. Let's actually get into the weapon system itself. The Raider, the P365 bad boy Raider. We are about 30 meters from some steel targets, and we're gonna be talking about how does it feel to shoot. First off, if we are not using that brace, I will tell you, there's definitely some hot spots that you will be feeling when you're shooting it. So first, let's go ahead and break yourself before you wreck yourself and shoot that round off and definitely miss whatever we were aiming at there. But we are now cleared and talking about hot spots. One is gonna be this right here. That meaty portion right behind your thumb where that knuckle is gonna start eating in if you don't have that brace deployed. Number two, if your grip's thumb forward like you would on a traditional pistol, you'll start feeling some recoil impulse right there. And there's an edge on this, magazine release that's gonna start eating away at your knuckle here. I can feel it, I can set the pistol down, and I can still feel where it was rubbing from those few shots. Is it a big deal? Absolutely not, because once again, we can run ammunition, take this pistol and shoot these targets as well as, I possibly can, being the disabled that I absolutely am. But yeah, the ergonomics, definitely without that brace deployed, it a little bit leaves you wanting. But what I will tell you, if you have a terrible problem with, pulling that trigger, there is a solution, and that is called a brace like me, because, once again, my pad of my finger is actually offset. Retarded and disabled I am, and how much better you will be with this system. Like, let's see, we're 30 meters out and I have a chest silhouette target, so it's about the size of my chest. But I can take it up and just 2 shots rung off right in that chest, dead center. Let's clear this out. Boom. And I'm not really trying so much with those trigger squeezes and pulls because we have that brace there. I will show you a video or a clip here of why that brace matters. Watch that red dot when I pull this trigger. See that little jump? Just that little jump is massive on target. And when you have so much stability in a system, it takes out almost 90% of the failure points when you're shooting at distance, especially with a handgun. Okay, now from here, let's talk about the recoil impulse. How does it feel? It is unpleasant. I'll be honest with you guys. It's unpleasant. Next thing we're gonna be talking about is accuracy. This pistol is as accurate as you want it to be. You can make this as accurate as any other pistol on the market, if not better. This can be more accurate than even some PCCs out there. You can get a 6-inch barrel on this bad boy and still carry it in your pants. How many people are rocking something 6 inches in their pants? Not 90% of you, I can tell you that right now. Damn! But yeah, you can definitely conceal a 6-inch python on this bad boy and still hit those accurate shots even further out to distance. Let's go into reliability. How reliable is this firearm itself? Oh my goodness gracious, guys. It is a problem, right? So reliability with this handgun, it really does matter in the parts selection, even from OEM parts from SIG, because SIG sends some very bad parts. I hated this handgun when I first got it. Why? Why did I hate it? Because it kept malfunctioning, malfunction after malfunction after malfunction. But I was thinking, I replaced the slide with 4 different slides. I replaced, everything that was not flux, I replaced like 6 or 7 times, except the FCU. I was like, why don't I replace the FCU in it and see if that's the problem? Boom, it was the problem. The FCU that I was running, I guess, was just enough in spec to work on a normal conventional handgun, but when I threw it into this chassis system, it started running. I've had 2 malfunctions since I replaced that chassis system, and I will go ahead and blame that on these magazines. You can see some of my magazines are definitely worn out here. I did replace the springs in them, but you know, that can only take you so far when you're shooting as many rounds as I am. But after 2 malfunctions within 1,000 rounds, I would say it's relatively reliable given how much beating I've given it. You know, it's never malfunctioning on that first good magazine, that brand new magazine I run in it. It never malfunctions on those. It's always while I'm moving and transitioning into different magazines that, you know, have some issues with them. So I'm not super worried about those 2 malfunctions. In the past 500 or 1,000 rounds that I've been shooting it, it just hasn't been a concern to me for the fact that, you know, those magazines are a problem that I know of, and I don't carry those magazines. Now from here, let's go ahead and talk about those pros and cons, because yes, I do have a pros and cons list for, you know, this weapon system. One, like I said, stability. This is the most stable handgun platform you will ever shoot when we're talking about, you know, actually being a conventional handgun. We're not talking about like an ARP or something like that. It is stable as hell, and you can use it in multiple situations, which is another pro. You know, the versatility of this weapon system. You can throw your freaking 3-inch barrel on here, or you can throw your freaking, 6-inch barrel on here. And not only does that bring up the versatility, but accuracy when it comes out to going to distances. What distance are we shooting at? When are we going to be engaging these targets? How fast are we going to be engaging them? You know, things like that. You know, that versatility is amazing. You can throw a light on here. You can throw a bracket on here to move that optic forward of the slide, not riking on the slide whatsoever. So now you have a more stable zeroing position for your red dot because it's metal on metal contact. You can probably throw a lamb on here. I'm sure somebody out there has done it, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities with this weapon system. This is practically adult Legos when it comes to the versatility and how you can be using that. And I'm gonna go ahead and say the customization with this also wraps into there, but we do have a few cons we should talk about, and that's gonna be the bulky handgun, but it's not impossible to use. It's not the worst handgun to use. You definitely can train around some of these bulkiness and issues. You've seen me wear this with just a t-shirt. You've seen me wear this with a hoodie. There's plenty of different ways you can wear and conceal this. No problem whatsoever. I am wearing ear pro right now, so like I'm out in nature, like looking around, making sure like no one's creeping up on me. It's just caveman brain kicking in there. The training. Another con with this is you are gonna have to train around it, because when it does come to, pop that brace out, grab another magazine. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and just pop, pop, pop. So with this reload, it's not a traditional reload, guys, right? So we're gonna go ahead and we'll pop this round up here, go in, reload, bring it down, and then you can readjust your hand to whatever grip you want, but that's something you're gonna have to train with. Same thing with that draw. When you're drawing it out, depending if you have that brace deployed or not deployed, you're gonna have to train, pulling this handgun out, whatever, firing it, bringing out that brace, if you're reloading, and then boom, 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 back on target. These are all things you're going to have to train around and learn how to use, because this is a completely different manual of arms than any weapon system you are even close to, pinched my finger, you're even close to understanding how to use and manipulate. So, training is something we should consider when we are using this weapon system. And then I also have written down here, printing. I must have been drinking when I was writing it down, because bulkiness, printing, about the same thing here. Genuinely, guys, I don't have so much of a... If you're concealed carrying this and you have both magazines in here, you ever think of the wedge they talk about with holsters where they have the wedge on there? This is practically a built-in wedge for your handgun. I don't always like carrying that second magazine because I have had problems with that magazine catching on my belt line. But if you cant that pistol in towards your body, like torque it in and like scrape against your body, pull out, present, it will pull out 99% of times. Granted, we don't all use the pull-out method because there's that 1% of time where oopsies happen. Such as the magazine catching, or you're paying child support for some bitch that you don't even like. Go. Oh, oh, what happened? What happened? Did the Raider just break live? It just broke live on my review. Hell yeah. Not hell yeah, like, you know, I'm happy this happened, but, you know, that is a definite malfunction that we should have to deal with. What the hell happened? What the double H hockey sticks happened here? Dang. Let's go ahead and pull these glasses off and do some further investigation here. I found it. It is, you know, a little hex bit and spring. I'll have to clean this up and see if I have any further malfunctions with this weapon system. Man, we're pushing 2,000 rounds. 2,000 rounds. And I was stoked. I thought this was, you know, an incredible, you know, this is back in here. How does this lock in though? Am I missing another piece? I don't know. Dang it, this review is a nightmare sometimes. Let's talk about everything that is broken on this handgun since I've owned it, because honestly guys, it's getting, you know, it's piling up when it comes to breaking stuff. So first, recoil lugs did break on this. I had to send it back to Flux. Guess their fucking time they took me to email me back. Yeah, it was 5 minutes. It took them 5 minutes to email me back, you know, sending me a shipping label and having this sent back to them to be repaired. It took them a little while to get it back to me, but I can't hate the fact that they were very responsive with everything. Even when there was an issue with USPS, they overcame that very quickly. So some of that lead time was on me because I did not email them back fast enough. Next, Holosun. I broke my Holosun. I'm still waiting on my Holosun to come back. It broke about a month ago. I think it's gonna be here later this month. And then I have a Streamlight, you know, freaking TLR7 Alpha on here, and I have lost every single screw except one on this body of this weapon system. And you know, they're gonna hopefully send me another one. We'll find out. And yeah, I've broken a lot of stuff on this, and it seems like I will keep breaking things on it. I don't know if this was, I'm gonna assume, I'm gonna put this one on Flux, saying that they didn't put any Loctite on this screw, because looking at this screw, it doesn't have any Loctite on it whatsoever. So maybe somebody on the production line just decided not to use Loctite. Maybe there's a reason they're not using Loctite on this. You know, that'll be for me to find out in the future and see what they have to say about that. But thank God this happened at the end of my review process. So go ahead and like, comment, subscribe to find out what actually happened with this weapon system and further updates on when this gets resolved. Don't worry, no cliffhanger. I did grab an Allen key, retighten up this bolt, and we are back into business. But I want you to let me know in the comment section below, is this Flux's fault, or is it my fault as, you know, the owner and user of this firearm not to, you know, check my hardware after, you know, thousands of rounds and, you know, months and months of carrying this thing? Should that be on me, or should that be on Flux Defenses for not putting Loctite on that bolt? Personally, I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. You know, if you carry gear every day, you should be doing those PCCs, those PCIs, making sure that your equipment is up to spec and ready to rock and roll. So I can definitely see that being my fault. Another thing I want you to keep in mind is that shows you why you shouldn't put all your faith in one review. Never put all your faith in one review. I was at the end of my review. This is the last section I have to film. And then that happened in the last section I had to film. You would have never known that was a problem. You'd have never known that was an issue. The two reasons why I purchased this weapon system. One is a bunch of poor me bullshit, got my fingers ripped off. I could not, you know, carry a traditional handgun because I could not manage the recoil impulse, and my grip strength was severely, you know, deteriorated because, you know, physical therapy, not using the hand for a few months, blah, 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 blah. So I needed a handgun that was relatively forgiving on the grip system, and I could manage that recoil relatively well. So bada boom, bada bang. The second reason is the SHTF situation, right? Now, a lot of dudes are gonna go trick out AR-15s and make the most Gucci freaking AR-15, LPVO, ACOG, red dot, you know, throw a lamb on there, throw a fucking Surefire Vampire, you know, whatever they want to do to that AR-15. But the problem with that is you will not be able to carry that on your person. that is not a concealed carry weapon. So you'd have to, you know, store that weapon system in a vehicle, and in an SHTF situation, vehicles may or may not be more likely to be broken into. So how are you gonna store a $5,000 rifle, $10,000 rifle in a vehicle that is more likely to be broken into and stolen? Makes no sense whatsoever. But this gives you what? A way to not only carry a pistol, but I would argue one of the most accurate pistols you could carry, and also have it stabilized with 3 points of contact, whether you're using it traditionally as a brace, or if you're disabled like me and you brace it in other ways and other means, whatever makes, you know, most sense in your scenario. But you have this, which you could put a red dot on, you could put a light on, you could put a lamb, you could put a red dot with the mount forward of the slide, and it won't be attached to the slide at all, so it won't be, you know, susceptible. Am I saying that right? Sure, why not? It won't be susceptible. Whatever. It's not gonna have that recoil impulse that's gonna completely eat up the lifetime of your red dot, so you can mount it more forward facing and modify a holster to carry it. And what's great about this is you can store 1 mag, 2 mags, close the brace, into the holster, and on your person, and you don't see anything, right? Can you tell I'm carrying a weapon system, camera woman? No, not really. And then SHTF stuff happens, you pull your weapon system, you deploy that brace, and then you accurately lay down hate to whatever, you know, may be causing you those problems at that given moment. Now, that being said, this brace also auto deploys, but for video purposes and video purposes only, and or training, because I did want to, you know, practice those reps of, you know, pulling this out and then taking it, putting it on target without that brace deploying, just so I could see if it was a tenable situation for me. Unfortunately, I did find out, do not laugh at me, to hold that laughter back, my finger was cut off just enough to where it's hard for me to deploy the brace from the middle finger, sliding it forward to deploy it. So I do have to use my non-dominant hand to deploy that brace when I collapse it. So if I push the weapon system out, I gotta ring it, wrap it around. It's kind of funny, all right? But other than that, I do have it set on auto deploy because I think it's the most preferential, you know, way to run this system, especially for concealed carry, because when I pull that brace out, see how that shirt kind of gets in the way? If that brace deploys automatically, it just pushes the shirt out of the way. I can go on target, and we're, you know, all having a good time with that system set up like so. But yes, you can have it manually, like lock in here, or you know, just tighten that screw up and bada boom, bada bang, you know, it auto deploys, gets that shirt out of the way. You can access that weapon system that much faster. Now, that being said, my fastest time with this particular system is a 1.23 shot time from concealment, which is fast, but it's not fast enough to make me happy. Fit and function of this weapon system. For one, the magazines are just like the legacy firearm, which is the 3 different ways to disengage your magazine. You have a half click here to pull this one out. You have a full click, which will drop both magazines at once. And then you have your half click here, which will drop this mag like so. So yes, very, very functional. You have your brace deployment here, which is very cool that they made it an auto and a manual deployment. The only problem is you gotta be very careful when adjusting the screw, because you screw it in too far, that screw will go in too deep and then fall into your magazine well here, and you will have a hell of a time getting it put back into place. It's not the end of the world, it's just kind of an irk. It's a little bit annoying, but other than that, it does function relatively well, and I do appreciate that they did set in that auto deployment lever. And then I don't know if I mentioned, but right here you have a button that you can depress, and that is how you collapse everything nice and tight. Now, I will say, if you're running the blast chamber, which you probably should be if you're running a short slide or an XL slide like this one, you will start to have a bunch of carbon build up around your front sight and then all around your barrel and stuff. It does build up a little bit of carbon in that blast chamber. I definitely understand why they, you know, included the blast chamber, you know, because if you don't have it on there, and you do like a C clamp or something like that, you no longer have a thumb and you are less of a human being. You will be missing pieces, and that's gross. All right, let me flip sides here, and I'm gonna show you some of the problems people have been having and are no longer problems with some generations and others. I have noticed if you just completely crank down on this thing, sometimes it will catch, but I clearly have cleaned my weapon system since then. But if you crane down on it super hard, sometimes this piece will catch. I've ran into that one time, and I cleaned the weapon system, lubricated these rails, and we are back off to the races. A problem I did see too was people losing this red spring right here. That is no longer a problem. They actually have it screwed down in with a washer and a bolt, I do believe. And so I don't know why I keep hitting that brace, but they do have it bolted in with a screw and a washer, it looks like. So all in all, that problem has been resolved as well. And this weapon system does have two what you may call consumable items. One is going to be this piece of shot cord here. Shot cord's pretty easy to come by, and then you have a little rubber piece inside here that holds that FCU down to get rid of a little bit of the wobble from the slide. And that doesn't have a part number. None of these have a part number with it, which is a complaint I do have. But if you do need one of these pieces, you can contact Flux, or if you want to, it is the rubber dampener that is inside your ejector spring right here. If you need to find that through SIG for some reason, you can also do that. All in all, the fit finish is immaculate. I love how they actually started making steel firearms, make steel firearms great again. And that's about it on this section. Let's go ahead and move on to something else. I didn't see you there. I was relaxing. But what I do have to say is, if there's anything I would change about this weapon system, or that I think Flux should do, there's not very many because they did most things right. But one would be, I would love a chopped version. Even if they did like a small line where they have the blims and they chop it so you can fit an XL at the front and then a macro in the back. That way you have that flush fit on the bottom of the magazine. I think that would be absolutely wonderful. Now, another thing is a manual. I would love a manual to come with the firearm with the part numbers of consumable items. I mean, we've all replaced the FCU in these, and we know when we replace the FCU, that retention spring on that pin retaining spring, it loves to yeet itself and delete itself, and you have to go and order another one through SIG's website, which is an outrageous price. I think they're like $9 or something for one. And yeah, very upsetting. Another thing I would love to see is a builder. So that would be like, a kind of like an aggregate of all the SIG producing OEM parts, where you could have like, I want to put a fuse slide on here, so I want to see what the fuse slide would look like on this chassis. Or I want to get a fuse slide, and then I want to get a comp, and let's see if that comp that I decide to pick would go right onto the fuse and stick at the end and be able to preserve my fingers. Just small things like that where you could build it out however you'd want. Hey, I wonder if this extended would fit on this random light. Oh, it will? That would be wonderful. Nothing crazy really on the firearm that I'd want to change. I would love to see a comp that's produced that would fit the XL slide that's long enough to fit the end of the weapon system. That way you don't have to have the blast chamber. It would make cleaning the weapon system a lot nicer. Another thing is, I'm not a huge fan of the Torx screws underneath the light here, just because when I have to take them off, I would have to, remove my light and then look for my Torx bits, which would be in like my gear bag. So I'd have to go to order my truck or, to my gear room and, grab all that stuff up, which is just kind of a headache. Nothing crazy here on the things I would change. And yeah, I guess let's go back to another segment on the video. So let's talk about the suppressor. It's definitely gassy. You can actually see where the lube just shot straight back into my face. All that right there, just right into my face. The optic is completely obscured. You could see me wiping it off. So you can see that, it ran 3 of those magazines just fine, but one of those magazines, the rounds kept wanting to nosedive. And I don't know if it's because the suppressor just shot a bunch of junk right into it, because it was the first magazine I used, or what could have been going on with it. But it did run, except that magazine, which like I said, I think it shot a bunch of stuff down into that mag and gummed it up, so I definitely will have to clean that out and do a little bit more investigation on it. Generally, I've not shot thousands of rounds suppressed with this because I don't think this particular system is, you know, amazing suppressed. I don't think it's its strong suit, but you could definitely suppress it and run it. You're just gonna have to play with it and spend a little bit of time figuring out what you know, can and can't do with it. You definitely want to make sure you didn't over lubricate, you know, your freaking Nielsen device and or your handgun, because that will come back to bite you in the ass. I now have 10 less years in this world, which, you know, could be bad, could be good. It just depends on, you know, what those 10 years are gonna look like. If you're debating between this and, you know, the normal Raider, I would definitely go get that 320 Raider instead of the 365 if you're looking for a suppressor host, because I have, you know, I've got a lot of rounds. I've got over 1,000 rounds on just that Raider being suppressed, if not plus. And I found what works with it, and you know, I like it suppressed sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on my mood of that week. I actually have 2 slides set up for that Raider if I want to shoot suppressed or if I want to shoot, you know, compensated and smooth and fast. But it's definitely not as nice as the traditional Raider as a suppressor host, but it does work if you are looking at using it in that applications. Some of the other problems I've seen when people are running this with suppressor is it kind of seems like this weapon system, because of, you know, how short it is in the gas system, a lot of people have had some problems running it without a Nielsen device. So you may have to look into getting a Nielsen device for, you know, your specific setup because of reasons. I think Brass Facts talked about his barrel being completely eaten up. But yeah, the barrel is completely fouled up from running a, you know, suppressor without a Nielsen device. So it's definitely something you're going to have to look into and think ahead of when you are building out your chassis. All right, other than that, let's get back to the video. Carrying the handgun. So I do have a few complaints with carrying a handgun, and you see here I have a thin leather belt. I don't always carry a thin leather belt. Sometimes I wear my inner belt from my battle belt, and that is a little bit more rigid, but sometimes it'll start to sway, order this way or that way, and I'm just gonna kind of slightly correct it. That issue isn't as prevalent when you are running, you know. I want you guys to guess how many magazines I have in my pocket right now. It isn't as prevalent if you are running 2 magazines, but I'm not always running 2 magazines on my system. That being said, it is doable carrying 2 magazines. The only thing is with your draw, you want to make sure to cant it towards your body when you pull it out, like so, or, you know, you will catch that magazine on your belt line. But going back into carrying, it is a little bit uncomfortable. It starts to rub right here on my inner thigh. When I'm going to bend down, I look like I'm grabbing my dick. I'm just grabbing my gun to pull it up so I can bend down and grab stuff, and or I'm doing like a weird squat and trying to grab something up. But you know, we got the rubbing, we got the canting of the pistol where it kind of slides around a little bit. The mobility, you can still run and do a lot of stuff with this, but it definitely, you know, it reminds you how big it actually is. And you know, some of us are a fan of big packages, some of us aren't. Personally, I'm not a fan of big packages. You know, I like a smaller package. You know, it's just because it's not, you know, it's too tight down there. Okay. Like, comment, subscribe, you know, blah, 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 blah. Get off my range. Back at it again. You know, I deleted that portion where I farted. Like, completely. Like, I deleted it from the deleted sections, too.
That was kind of funny.
It was funny. I wish I'd have kept it. Damn it. Okay, anyways.